Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here, as always, to cut through the noise and really get into the heart of significant source material.
Looking forward to it.
Today, we are taking a close look at a real classic, a cornerstone of post-apocalyptic fiction, George R. Stewart's Earth Abides. This one came out way back in 1949.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because it's not your typical disaster story with, huge explosions or zombies running around. It's about the quiet after, the silence.
Exactly. It's about what happens when almost everyone is just gone, wiped out by a silent plague.
And Stewart himself, he wasn't primarily a sci-fi writer in the pulp sense. He was an English professor at Berkeley, an academic. He approached this whole scenario almost like an ecological study.
An ecological study of humanity's absence.
Pretty much. The big question for him wasn't how did humanity almost die out, but what happens next? What happens to the few survivors, and maybe more importantly, what happens to the planet itself when we're not running the show anymore?
And that unique focus, that sort of quiet, observational quality, is probably why it's held up so well, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it won the International Fantasy Award back in '51, which was a big deal then. And you still see it pop up on those best sci-fi ever lists all the time.
So our mission today, our deep dives, is to follow the journey of the main character, watch how the complex machinery of civilization just grinds to a halt, see how a new, fragile community tries to form, and really unpack the ways knowledge and society kind of regress. It's surprising and honestly a bit unsettling.
It definitely makes you think. So should we start with our main guy, Ish Williams?
Yeah, let's introduce Ish. He's not exactly your typical action hero survivor.
No, not at all. He's a graduate student, very intellectual, bookish, and his specific field of study is actually perfect for this story. He's writing his thesis on the ecology of the Black Creek area.
So he's already thinking in terms of systems, interactions, how things connect in nature.
Exactly. That ecological mindset becomes the lens through which we see everything unfold. It frames the whole narrative.
But how he survives the plague itself, that's just pure luck, isn't it? Almost random.
Completely random. A biological fluke, really. He's out doing his research up on a rock ledge somewhere remote, and boom, gets bitten by a rattlesnake.
Right, just a mundane hazard of fieldwork.
He notes the bite, feels the sting, and basically holes up alone in his isolated cabin to recover. He's feverish, delirious from the venom for days, maybe weeks. And he just thinks of it as a terrible inconvenience at the time.
But that inconvenience, that isolation and fever, it shields him.
It inadvertently shelters him while this incredibly swift, deadly plague is racing across the entire globe, wiping almost everyone out. While he's fighting off snake venom, the world is ending outside his door, and he doesn't even know it.
Wow. And Stewart gives us these little glimpses of that ending world later, doesn't he? Through things Ish finds.
Yeah, these fragmented pieces. Like static-filled radio broadcasts he might have heard faintly, or tattered newspaper clippings he discovers much later. They paint this picture of total rapid collapse.
The one that always sticks with me is that chillingly bureaucratic final message.
Oh yeah, the government of the United States of America is herewith suspended.
Yes.
Just suspended, like closing an office for the day, but forever.
The sheer weight of history, bureaucracy, power, just switched off.
Gone. And then other details like reports about abandoned hospitalization centers, overwhelmed and then just empty. People stopped going because there was no one left to help.
And the plague itself, Stewart, keeps it a bit mysterious, doesn't he? Ish speculates.
He does. Ish wonders about the origin. Was it something natural, jumping from an animal host, like some new zoonotic nightmare?
Or maybe a sudden, really nasty viral mutation?
Or the darker possibility, he considers what he calls a vindictive release. Like something cooked up in a biowarfare lab, maybe designed for one enemy, but then just got out of control and hit everyone.
But Stewart doesn't seem too interested in nailing down the cause, does he? It's more about the effect.
Exactly. What defines it for Ish, and for the ecological theme, is how specific it was. It overwhelmingly targeted humans, and maybe their closest relatives.
Ah, right, that detail about the zoos.
Yes. That report, Ish remembers hearing about, I think it was the San Diego Zoo director, saying his apes and monkeys were dying off really fast, almost as fast as humans, but other animals, seemingly untouched.
That reinforces the idea of it being almost like a targeted biological event. Not random chaos, but something removing the dominant species.
Precisely. It fits Stewart's ecological perspective. It wasn't just destruction, it was a massive shift in the planet's ecosystem, taking the top predator off the board.
Which really sets up the core question the book grapples with, doesn't it? Are humans essential stewards, or just a temporary blip the Earth can shrug off?
That's the heart of it.
Yeah.
And with that stage set, we follow Ish as he finally recovers, leaves his mountain cabin, and steps out into this profoundly changed, profoundly silent world. The psychological impact must have been immense.
Let's get into that immediate aftermath. Section 2, silence, ghosts, and the secondary kill.
Okay, so Ish comes down from the mountains, recovered from the snake bite, expecting, well, who knows what he is expecting. But what hits him first is the silence.
Not just quiet, but a specific kind of silence.
A profound, unnerving lack of human activity. He drives through deserted towns like Hudsonville, and the cars are just parked along the street as normal. Houses look fine, it's like everyone just vanished mid-sentence.
It's not ruins, it's like a stage set after the actors left.
Exactly. That makes the silence even heavier, somehow. It's not the silence of nature, it's the silence where people should be.
And he tries to break it right. He uses his car horn.
Yeah, he does this methodical thing, blowing the horn, long blasts, listening, hoping for any response, any sign that he's not alone.
Yeah.
Nothing. Just the echo of his own horn in the empty streets. Well, almost nothing. He does hear one sound.
Ah, the hen.
The distant cackling of a single hen somewhere. It's such a small, mundane sound, but it's huge in that context. It's nature just carrying on, completely indifferent to the human catastrophe.
That indifference is chilling. And then there are the ghosts he encounters, the remnants of technology.
Oh, those are powerful moments. They really get under his skin, and yours, as a reader. He goes into an abandoned house looking for supplies, maybe just out of curiosity.
And the refrigerator.
He opens the door and the motor kicks in with a whirr. Still running. And the electric clock on the wall is still ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Measuring time that doesn't matter anymore.
Keeping food cold for people who will never eat it.
Exactly. That persistence of useless machinery, that automated hum in a dead house, it's too much for him. He calls it too ghost-like.
It makes him physically sick, doesn't it?
Yeah. He actually vomits into the sink. It's the sheer pointlessness of it all hitting him. All that energy, all that ingenuity, still cycling away with no purpose. It represents the hubris of a civilization that thought it could build things to last forever, only to be undone by biology.
And it's not just small appliances. Some of the big infrastructure is still going, especially where he is in California.
Right. The hydroelectric dams. Unlike, say, coal or steam-powered plants in the East that would need constant human input, the big hydro plants in the West, powered by gravity and water flow, they just keep going for a surprisingly long time.
So the lights are still on in some cities?
For a while, yeah. He sees the lights of the East Bay cities glowing at night. He sees traffic lights still working, cycling through green, yellow, red for empty intersections.
They're working ghosts.
And those flashing warning lights on the bridge towers, the ones for airplanes, still dutifully blinking away, warning pilots who will never fly again. It's this theater of the absurd, run by automated systems.
Nothing sums that up better than the advertising sign.
Yeah. That flashing neon sign, he sees it somewhere, just blinking on and off, on and off. Drink, then blackness. Drink, then black.
What was it even advertising? Does he know?
It doesn't matter. The message is lost, incomplete. It's just this hypnotic, pathetic pulse of meaningless commerce flashing into the night, the last gasp of consumer culture.
So you have this eerie persistence of some technology, but it obviously doesn't mean safety or stability.
Not at all. And Ish quickly grasps this crucial idea, something Stewart really develops. The concept of the secondary kill.
Explain that a bit more. It's not the plague itself.
No. The secondary kill is what happens to the people who survive the plague. They didn't die from the disease, but they fall victim to all the problems that arise when civilization suddenly disappears. The support systems, the rules, the basic safety nets, they're all gone.
And Ish encounters people who fall into this category almost immediately when he starts actively searching for others.
He does, and they're grim examples. First, there's Mr. Barlow, just described as a poor old drunk.
And now, with no restrictions, no jobs, no social pressure.
And liquor stores wide open with effectively unlimited supply. He just drinks himself into oblivion. There's nothing left to structure his life, no reason not to drink. He succumbs to his addiction, enabled by the collapse. That's a form of secondary kill.
Then there are others who are more actively dangerous.
Right. He runs into this couple, heavily armed, and they just radiate menace. They look at Ish not as a fellow survivor, but as a potential threat, or maybe even prey.
Implying they've already turned to violence, maybe looting, maybe worse.
Stewart suggests it. They represent the immediate breakdown of the social contract. When there are no police, no laws, no consequences, some people revert instantly to a kind of predatory Hobbesian state, survival of the most ruthless. That's another facet of the secondary kill, death by violence or paranoia.
And the third type he meets?
The terrified old man. He's completely lost his mind, driven insane by the shock and the isolation. He's babbling about it being the wrath of an angry god, divine punishment.
And Ish sees the danger in that line of thinking for himself, doesn't he?
He explicitly thinks about it. He recognizes that starting to believe you were specially chosen, divinely spared, like some kind of Noah, that way lies madness. He sees the old man as a victim of psychological collapse, another casualty of the secondary kill. Addiction, violence, insanity. These are the dangers after the plague.
So while humanity is struggling with this, or succumbing to it, what's happening in the natural world? Stewart pays a lot of attention to that.
Oh yeah, he's the ecologist, remember. He contrasts the human chaos with the swift, logical, almost inevitable responses of nature reclaiming its space. The sections on domestic animals are particularly telling.
Right, like the dairy cows.
A brutal example. They're highly specialized, dependent on humans for daily milking, for providing water in barns. Without humans, they die quickly, painfully, trapped by their dependents. Thoroughbred horses, bred for specific traits, also don't fare well.
But not all domestic animals struggle.
No. The hardier breeds, like the white-faced Hereford cattle out on the range, they manage much better. They were already semi-wild. Stewart knows they look out for themselves, find water, defend themselves. He even anticipates their future, that eventually predators like lobo wolves will return to establish a new natural balance, keeping the herds healthy.
It's survival of the adaptable, not necessarily the strongest in the old system.
Exactly. And look at cats versus dogs. Cats, Stewart writes, only had about 5,000 years of domestication and always accepted it with reservations. They revert to hunting fairly easily, though they face new competition from wildcats.
Dogs have a harder time.
Generally, yes. More dependent, more pack-oriented around humans. Some adapt, form wild packs, but many struggle without their masters.
But the most striking example of failed adaptation is the sheep.
Oh, absolutely poignant. Sheep are the ultimate symbol of dependence. Ish sees flocks wandering aimlessly, dying on roadsides, lost in storms, starving near water they can't find without guidance, stampeding over cliffs in panic.
Sheep without a shepherd.
Precisely. They become easy prey for the newly emboldened wild dogs, coyotes, mountain lions. Stewart's conclusion is stark and inevitable. In the end, there will be no more sheep. They simply cannot survive without the human system that created and maintained them.
A powerful metaphor for certain aspects of human society too, perhaps. The parts that are too specialized, too reliant on the complex systems we build.
I think that's exactly the implication. Some skills, some ways of life are just too dependent. When the system collapses, they collapse with it. And that realization really sets the stage for Ish's next phase. He can't just wander and observe anymore. He needs to build something new.
Which brings us to part 3. Building the Ark. From just surviving to trying to create a future.
Right, so Ish has seen the collapse. He's seen the dangers of the secondary kill. He understands the ecological shifts. Now, how do you actually start over?
He first has to sort of assess himself, right? What does he bring to the table?
Yeah, he recognizes his own strengths and weaknesses. He knows he survived partly due to luck, but also because he's intellectually oriented. He's a reader. He thinks analytically. And crucially, he's not superstitious.
That point about superstition seems really important to him.
It is. He consciously rejects that chosen one narrative we mentioned. He thinks about the temptation, seeing himself as a new Adam or a Noah building an ark. But he recognizes that path leads to insanity, like the old man he met. His power, he decides, lies in knowledge, in reason, not divine appointment.
But knowledge alone isn't enough to start a society. He needs people.
Exactly. And then he finds M.
Tell us about M. She's a pivotal character.
Absolutely central. She's introduced not as someone needing rescue, but as incredibly strong, pragmatic, focused on the immediate reality. If Ish is the thinker, M is the doer, the anchor.
She's often described as a mother of nations type, isn't she?
Yes, that archetype fits perfectly. Her priorities are survival, finding food, shelter, and very importantly, having children. She represents continuity, the biological imperative.
And this immediately creates a kind of tension or maybe a complementary dynamic with Ish.
Oh, definitely. A core tension right from the start. Ish is still clinging to the structures of the old world, the intellectual framework. For instance, he becomes really obsessed with keeping track of time.
Like the calendar, the week.
Yeah, maintaining the 7-day week, figuring out the exact date, calculating the solstice. He sees it as vital, a link to millennia of human tradition, stretching back to the Babylonians. It's about order, about not losing everything.
And M's reaction to this is less than enthusiastic.
Hilariously practical. She watches him struggle with his calculations and basically asks him, "Isn't that rather silly?"
Ouch.
Right. For her, knowing if it's Tuesday or Wednesday is utterly irrelevant if they don't have food for tomorrow or the children aren't safe. Her focus is purely on the present, on living, not on preserving abstract concepts from a dead world.
So Ish wants to reconstruct the past, and M wants to propagate the future.
That's a great way to put it, and that dynamic drives a lot of the early community development. Ish keeps trying to implement the old ways, and often it doesn't go well.
Like his attempt at gardening. That seems symbolic.
Hugely symbolic. He sets up this little garden plot very carefully, trying to grow food like people used to.
Yeah.
But it's a disaster.
Why? What goes wrong?
Everything. The seeds he scavenges are old, maybe hybrid types that don't reproduce well or aren't suited to the now wild conditions.
Yeah.
Slugs and pests move in immediately, no pesticides anymore.
And the animals.
Oh, the animals see it as a buffet. A buck deer wanders in and eats his fill. Even a cow, described as bold and predatory, comes and tramples things. His isolated little patch of cultivation is overwhelmed by nature.
So it's not just bad luck with gardening, it's a lesson.
It's a huge lesson for Ish. He realizes his garden failed because it was an anomaly. In the old world, a garden only worked because it was part of a massive invisible support system. Industrial agriculture, seed science, pest control, distribution networks, shared knowledge. Without that system, his lone effort is futile.
You have to work with a new ecology, not impose the old one onto it.
Precisely. You can't just recreate a piece of the old world in isolation. And he sees this retreat of the old world happening everywhere geographically, too.
Ah, when he travels.
Yeah, Stewart includes these sections where Ish travels years later. When he goes east into places like Arkansas, he sees how quickly nature is reclaiming the infrastructure. Aggressive plants like kudzu, berry brambles, they're literally swallowing the edges of the highways, blurring the lines, choking out the pavement.
The wilderness is pushing back hard.
Relentlessly. So as these attempts to cling to the old ways falter, the focus of the small community, the tribe, as they start calling themselves, it naturally shifts.
Towards what?
Towards the children. Their births become the most important events. Each new baby is a victory against the darkness of annihilation, as Stewart puts it. It pushes back the extinction they all fear.
And the demographics change quickly.
Yeah, there's a point mentioned around year 6 where the children actually outnumber the original adults who formed the group. That's a turning point. They are becoming a new generation.
But while the population is growing, the remnants of the old world are still decaying. The scavenged goods won't last forever.
Exactly. And the big infrastructure starts to fail, definitively. The loss of electricity is a major marker.
How does that happen? Didn't you say the hydro plants were still running?
They were, for much longer than the steam-powered plants in places like New York. Those needed constant fuel, constant maintenance, so they failed almost immediately. The Western hydro plants, simpler in some ways, relying on water flow, they lasted for years.
But not forever.
No. Eventually, lack of maintenance, maybe silt buildup, a mechanical failure somewhere deep inside. The dynamos stop turning. The lights flicker out across the Bay Area. Stewart has this great line, almost biblical in its reversal. Let there be no light, and there was no light.
The quiet death of power. Not a bang, but a whimper.
And the knowledge to fix it. Gone. Even if the dams are still physically there, nobody knows how to restart the complex, interconnected grid.
That loss must have been huge psychologically.
Immense. But an even more critical failure comes later, the water supply.
The aqueduct failure. That forces their hand, doesn't it?
It really does. It happens much later, but it's a crisis they can't ignore. And Stewart gives this amazing little detail about the cause.
What was it?
A tiny flaw, a weak spot in one of the giant concrete aqueduct pipes. A flaw that was likely missed years and years ago by some overworked inspector, maybe tired at the end of his shift, whose senses were just slightly dulled.
Wow. A tiny human error from the past.
Magnified by decades of neglect. The pipe finally gives way, causing this massive rupture, a mudslide that shifts the whole support structure. And suddenly, the reliable water supply they'd taken for granted just stops.
That's a genuine survival crisis. No water means.
It means they have to act collectively. They can't just scavenge passively anymore. They need to find a new, stable water source. They need to organize, make decisions, enforce rules for the good of the group. It's the catalyst for the true formation of a new kind of society, a new state.
Which leads us right into the next major section, the birth of the state and the shadow of regression.
Exactly. This water crisis forces them into organized action exploration. So around year 21, Ish and some of the younger men, the boys who've grown up in this world, go on an expedition.
Looking for water, maybe seeing if anyone else is out there.
Both. And they do find someone. But it's not the reunion they might have hoped for. They bring back a man named Charlie.
And Charlie is trouble.
Big trouble. He's described as physically imposing, maybe he has a certain rough charm, but there's something off about him. Dangerous.
What's the main concern? His personality.
That's part of it. Ezra, another older member of the tribe who has good instincts, immediately distrusts him. He senses something fundamentally ugly and dirty and mean about Charlie. But the more immediate, tangible fear is disease.
Ah, right. He boasts about having survived diseases.
Yeah, he casually mentions having had things like typhoid fever. And their community, the tribe, has been isolated for over 2 decades. They have no immunity to these old world diseases. Charlie is a potential biological time bomb.
Especially given his behavior.
Exactly. He starts paying attention to Evie, a girl in the community described as half-witted, someone who might not understand the danger or be able to protect herself from infection if he's carrying something. The risk of him starting an epidemic is terrifyingly real.
So this forces a confrontation. They have to decide what to do about Charlie.
It forces the issue of law, of governance. And this is where you see the clash between the remnants of the old world and the necessities of the new one.
Ish's son, George, tries to argue based on old principles.
Yet George still remembers, or perhaps was taught by Ish, about the old legal system. He makes the argument straight out of common law. You can't punish a man for something he ain't done yet. He's talking about due process, presumption of innocence.
The foundations of the justice system they no longer have.
Precisely. And it's M, the ultimate pragmatist, who cuts right through it all. George is appealing to abstract laws, and M just asks, with devastating simplicity, what law?
Wow, that really cuts to the core of it.
Doesn't it? Her point is brutal but true. Those old laws don't exist anymore. There's no police force, no courts, no prisons. There's only them and the immediate need to protect their children, their future. The social contract is void.
So the necessity of survival overrides the principles of the past.
It has to. The adults, Ish, M, George, Ezra, they deliberate, they weigh the risk, and they make an agonizing collective decision. The danger Charlie represents, especially the typhoid he bragged about, is just too great a threat to their fragile existence.
They decide to execute him.
Yes. The very first act of their newly forming state, their first piece of communal legislation, is an execution. Based on fear, on potential threat, on the need for collective self-preservation.
And Ish reflects on the irony of that, doesn't he?
Deeply. He realizes the terrible paradox. The state, which ideally should protect life, begins here with an act of killing. It wasn't born from high ideals in a calm debate. It was crystallized from necessity in a time of trouble, born out of fear and pragmatism.
A dark foundation for their new society.
And tragically, their fears prove well-founded, almost immediately after dealing with Charlie.
Typhoid hits.
Yeah. Year 22 becomes the typhoid year. Whether Charlie directly brought it or the expedition picked it up elsewhere, the epidemic sweeps through their vulnerable community.
And the cost is devastating, particularly for Ish personally.
It's the ultimate blow to his hopes. His youngest son, Joey, dies from the typhoid.
And Joey wasn't just any son to Ish, was he?
No. Joey was his intellectual hope. Joey was the one who was learning to read the old books Ish had saved. Joey was the one who asked that incredibly poignant question. If I read the books, could I make them make light again?
He represented the chance to rebuild, to understand and maybe reclaim the lost knowledge.
Exactly. He was the potential bridge back to that high civilization. Ish still mourned. Joey's death is the symbolic death of that dream. It signals that the regression is irreversible. The path forward is not back to the old ways, but deeper into a new, more primitive existence.
And you see signs of that regression everywhere in the community after this.
All over the place. Stewart details it meticulously. There's one strange, small benefit. The common cold seems to disappear, probably due to the isolation breaking the chain of infection.
A minor upside to societal collapse.
A very minor upside. But culturally, this shift is profound. Practical, physical skills become paramount. Intellectual pursuits are devalued because they don't seem useful anymore.
Like Walt the Carver versus Joey the Reader.
Perfect example. Walt, who can carve a functional tool or weapon with skill, is admired. His contribution is tangible. Joey, who could understand mathematics that 2 and 2 eternally make 4, well, that abstract truth doesn't help you hunt or survive, it becomes a useless science.
And technology follows the same path downwards.
Rapidly, those salvaged rifles. The gunpowder degrades over the decades. They become unreliable. More often than not, they just go click when the trigger's pulled.
Useless in a crisis.
Totally. So the community naturally reverts to more reliable, sustainable technology. Bows and arrows, they can make them themselves, maintain them.
And the materials for arrowheads.
That's another brilliant detail. They start hammering them out of metal coins scavenged from the dead cities. Those little round things with faces on them, once symbols of wealth and complex economy, are now just raw material for spear points and arrow tips.
Talk about recycling, and then superstition starts to creep in.
Yes, and this is something Ish finds particularly hard to stomach, being the rationalist. The children, the new generation, develop these arbitrary beliefs.
Like the arrowheads having specific powers based on color.
Exactly. They decide that red arrowheads, hammered from copper pennies perhaps, are somehow magically effective against dangerous animals like mountain lions or feral cattle. White ones, maybe from silver coins, are for deer.
Which is objectively nonsense.
Complete rank superstition, as Ish thinks of it.
Yeah.
There's no logical or physical basis for it whatsoever.
And Ish tries to fight this initially, tries to explain metallurgy or something.
He does. He has this debate with one of the young hunters, Jack, trying to explain that the metal itself is what matters, not the color or the arbitrary rule. He wants to preserve reason, logic.
But he gives up on that fight, doesn't he? Why?
Because he has this crucial realization.
Yeah.
It works, not physically, but psychologically. If the young hunter believes his red arrowhead gives him an edge against a lion, that belief gives him courage. It steadies his hand, makes him a more effective hunter.
So the practical utility of the belief outweighs its lack of factual basis.
In this new world, yes. Emotional conviction, even if rooted in myth, becomes a survival tool. And Ish makes the conscious, painful decision to let it go. He won't fight the superstitions anymore. He accepts that his tribe isn't going to rebuild the Enlightenment. They're building a new culture, one based on practical survival and psychological need, not necessarily on objective truth. That's a profound surrender for him.
A really sobering realization about what progress means or doesn't mean in the long run. Which takes us towards the end of the book and Ish's final perspective.
Yeah, the final section. The earth abides. Ish is now an old man. The decades have passed.
And his role in the tribe has changed.
Completely. He's become this revered, almost mythic figure, the last link to the old world, the last American. And that doesn't actively lead anymore. He mostly just sits, often holding that single jackhammer he found early on.
The hammer becomes symbolic.
Very much so. It was a powerful tool from the age of industry. Now it's treated almost like a sacred object, a relic of the powerful giants of the past. Ish becomes the keeper of the hammer, an oracle figure.
And he reflects on his life, his efforts.
He does. He realizes, perhaps sadly, that he spent his life observing, analyzing, planning for a future reconstruction that was never going to happen. While people like Em and Ezra, they just focused on living, on surviving day to day, on raising the next generation.
Em has some final words for him that really drive this home, doesn't she?
She does. It's incredibly poignant wisdom from her deathbed, basically. She tells him something like, "I've always wished you wouldn't worry so much. Things would be different if you had lots of people like you. But all you have are usual people."
Meaning his intellectual drive was an exception, not the rule.
Exactly. She's saying you can't expect everyone to be a scholar or a philosopher. Most people just want to live, survive, raise their kids. She gently tells them that their real achievement wasn't rebuilding civilization. It was simply solving the problem of survival for their specific generation. That's it.
A humbling perspective for Ish after all his dreams of restoration.
Very humbling. And he looks at the future, at the younger generation, his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They're strong, physically capable, confident in their world.
But different, fundamentally different.
Utterly different. They are, in his eyes, essentially primitive. They don't ask why things happen. They accept the world as it is, filled with the superstitions they've developed. They have no curiosity about the past, about the ruins around them.
And the library. What about all that stored knowledge?
Ah, the library. It still stands, physically preserved in the dry California climate. Millions of books, the entire record of human thought and achievement. But it's completely irrelevant.
Nobody can read it, or wants to.
Both. The younger generations are largely illiterate, and even if they could read, the context is gone. The knowledge in those books pertains to a world so alien, so complex, it has no bearing on their lives hunting with bows and arrows. The knowledge is physically present, but culturally extinct.
That's a chilling thought. The information survives, but the understanding dies.
And Ish has one last bleakly practical insight about their future, beyond just the loss of knowledge.
What's that?
He realizes their current way of life, scavenging the remnants of the old world, isn't sustainable either. It's living off the capital of the past. Eventually the matches will crumble, the last bullets will be fired, the metal tools will break or rust away.
Yeah.
Then, he predicts, maybe in 3 or 4 generations, they won't just be primitive, they'll be groveling primitives. They'll have lost the easy scavenging, but they also won't have the deep, ingrained skills of true savages who lived entirely off the land for millennia. They'll be caught in between, having lost one world without fully mastering the skills for another.
Wow. That's a dark forecast. It really makes you think about what parts of our own world are essential versus just decoration.
Absolutely. Stewart includes this wonderful, slightly tragicomic detail about George and Maureen, a couple in the tribe. Even decades after the collapse, they still compulsively collect things like defunct bridge lamps, old non-functional electric clocks.
Why? What do these things mean to them?
They're status symbols, relics of the old world's idea of prosperity and sophistication. Even though they don't work, owning them signifies some kind of link to that lost grandeur. It shows how deeply ingrained those consumerist, status-driven instincts are, even when the context is completely gone. It's all just pomp, meaningless ritual.
Which really hammers home the book's core message about the resilience of nature versus the fragility of human structures.
That's the ultimate takeaway, I think. It's an ecological novel at heart. The Earth itself is the main character, in a way. It doesn't judge humanity's fall. It simply adapts, rebalances, continues. Our complex societies, our knowledge, our ambitions, they seem incredibly fleeting and perhaps ultimately insignificant from the planet's perspective.
The Earth abides.
Exactly. The title says it all. And that final scene, it's just very old, very frail. There's a large forest fire sweeping through the hills, a natural event. The young men are carrying him away to safety.
And he looks out.
He looks out over the landscape. He sees the ancient hills, unchanged. He sees the rusted ruins of the bridges, maybe covered in bird droppings. He sees his own descendants, this new primitive tribe. He sees the cycle of life, the coming and going of generations against the backdrop of the enduring earth.
And his final thought sums it all up.
Men go and come, but earth abides.
Chilling. Powerful. It definitely leaves you thinking long after you finish the book. It makes you look at, well, everything differently. The technology we rely on, the knowledge we take for granted, our place in the grand scheme of things.
It's a profound piece of work. Quiet, thoughtful, but devastating in its implications.
A truly essential read, even all these years later. Well, that's our deep dive into George R. Stewart's Earth Abides. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We hope this gives you plenty to think about. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.